There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Figures show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
It's the rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to Climactic, a podcast on the Climactic Collective, a group of independent podcasters from across the range of the climate communities of Australia and New Zealand. Every week on Climactic, rain or shine, we either produce or feature an episode of a climate-engaged podcast. This could be from one of the shows on the Climactic Collective or beyond, and you'll always find a link to the show we're featuring at the top of the show notes. My name is Mark, and I'm the publisher of the Climactic Collective and of this show. And if you ever have any questions, I'm always reachable at hello@climactic.fm. I'm in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand, Aotearoa, and I pay my respects to the iwi of Tamaki Makaurau and acknowledge their shared sovereignty over this land, as enshrined in Te Tiriti, the Treaty of Waitangi. On today's episode, I'm proud to be bringing you another episode of Saltgrass. From friend of the show, Ali Hanley, this radio show produced on Main FM in Castlemaine is a beautiful radio show and podcast all about the climate crisis writ small, about how people and communities in Castlemaine and other places in regional Victoria and beyond are facing the climate crisis in everyday, relatable, powerful ways. As I record this, it's late November 2021, and that means for the last several weeks there's been a thing going on called Blockade Australia. Ali's going to talk more about this in the course of this episode, and I'll leave that up to her. She does a great job. But the reason why I, after hearing this re-release of an episode of Ali's show, wanted to bring it to you today is because the group featured, in fact, the individual person featured in this episode, also reached out to Climactic not too long ago to use our Community Corner. Community Corner is a little space we give on Climactic to the climate community to share messages or talk about events, basically get the word out about things. And when we share this space, we do include some directions on how best to use it. So a friend of the show and a past guest and a former school strike for climate organizer reached out about using that space, to which I said, yes, please. And the message we received was from a friend of theirs, who happens to be the subject of this episode. And I thought the recording that was sent in was lovely, but unfortunately lacking some of those actionable details, at least if you don't know more about what the group is all about. I'm going to play the message for you now, and then kick into Ali's episode, as I think they go really well together, and speaks very well to what Blockade Australia, this series of actions in November, was all about. What follows is a message on the Climactic Community Corner, free space we give to the climate community to share messages. To find out more or share a message of your own, just head to climactic.fm and click on Community Corner in the top banner.
We are here blockading Australia on Warramite and Awabakal lands in Newcastle. We are a direct opposition to Australia because Australia is destroying the planet and we need to do everything to stop this destruction. The trajectory of the climate is doing nothing but getting worse, and traditional methods have done nothing but fail us. We need to stand up and stand together against this destruction and against the total decimation of all life on Earth. We've been here for the past 11 days blockading the world's largest coal port. There's been 25 arrests and the police have been heavy-handed and are trying to repress us, but we will not be stopped by this oppressive state of Australia. We will continue to cause significant disruption in a place of importance, in a place that is significant to the function of Australia, and this is the kind of action that is necessary to force the change that we need to see to secure a safe future. We ask that you get involved in any way that you can on our social media, on our website. Come to Sydney on the 27th of June to the 2nd of July. If you want to get involved beforehand, message our page and definitely get into the Telegram channel. Yeah, and just share our story in any way you can. Thank you.
So I'm now going to hand over to Ali to tell you about who this person is, let her explain her actions in her own words, and let you get more of a sense for what the Blockade Australia movement is all about.
This episode of Saltgrass was recorded and first released in May 2020. In this episode, we speak with a family of activists and we take a closer look at what is going on with the Adani Coal mine. It's a hotly contested mine in Queensland that is still in construction and has been protested against since it first began. Long-term residents of Castlemaine, Ben and Jacynta, have spent a lifetime living with the earth in mind, from building a sustainable house to participating in protests and activism. Ben travelled on a thing called the Adani Convoy a year or so ago. The Adani Convoy was led by the renowned Greens leader and activist, Bob Brown, who's very famous in Australia, especially for his campaigns in Tasmania around the Tarkine forest. Ben is a visual artist and is known locally as something of an agitator, often providing cheeky and provocative takes on the current political issues. So in this episode, Ben talks about what it was like to be on the Adani Convoy with Bob Brown. And then Jacynta, his partner, has studied a master's in social ecology, and she's trained in facilitation and has studied the transition towns movement. And at the time of recording, Rilke, their daughter, was based up in Queensland and was heavily involved in the activist groups trying to disrupt the Adani coal mine from going ahead. And the reason I've chosen this episode to replay right now is that Jacynta has, in the last week, moved from being the proud parent of an activist to taking action herself. So I'm going to read you something that Ben posted on social media to give you an idea of what Jacynta's been up to in the last week or so. He says, "Latest update from the front line. You'll be pleased to know that Jacynta has been released from jail. She got a $1,600 fine for being a bloody nuisance. She had to promise to never do it again, but she wouldn't. So if she does anything naughty in that state within the next year, they take off the kid gloves and stop treating her like a grey-haired old lady." Jacynta was locked onto a big machine that is used for transferring coal to the ships. It's called a stacker reclaimer. She was there for about 4 hours. The entire enterprise had to close down. Apparently they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars that they were going to give to the poor. And this is where you have to understand Ben's sense of humour, because he's obviously being sarcastic there. The cops had to cut the lock-on device from her arms. They do this with an angle grinder. There are lots of sparks, and so they put a sack over her head and her body except for the arms. It's dark and noisy. The grinder heated up the metal, so she complained. I think she said, "Ouch, that hurts." So they got water and poured it all over the metal. They have a duty of care that they seem to take seriously, especially when there is national coverage of these actions. Then they arrested her and locked her up in the cells for 12 hours. And again, this is Ben's sense of humour. They tortured her, but only a bit. They starved her for 4 hours and then they gave her a McDonald's hamburger. I think we can all agree that that should be classed as torture in the UN guidelines. One down, but many more waiting to take her place. Go to Blockade Australia for the latest action. And he puts a link to Blockade Australia. So I'm going to put that link on the episode description at saltgrasspodcast.com if you're interested. And when she gets back and has had a chance to rest and recover, I'll see if Jacynta wants to come back on the show to do a follow-up interview. As usual, I'd like to acknowledge that this program has been made on Jara country, the land of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. I pay respects to the elders of all Aboriginal people, past and present. May we start listening and stop destroying their land and their culture.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change. Saltgrass.
Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com. I'm sitting here today with Ben Laycock, Jacynta Walsh and Rilke Laycock Walsh. There you go. So Ben and Jacynta are Rilke's parents, and they are familiar figures around Castlemaine. They've been here for many years. How many years have you guys been here?
Since 1992.
There you go.
And thanks for having us.
And you're actually on the wall at MASG with a much younger Rilke. We did a photographic project with Deanna Neville, and she took photos of people from around Castlemaine who were carbon heroes, and you guys are up there as carbon heroes.
Aww. Nice, isn't it?
I want to see that.
Drop into the MASG office, you can see it. So we're going to talk about the Adani coal mine, or the proposed coal mine, which is still being contested. An Indian company wants to come in and dig up a lot of ground in the Galilee Basin, which is in Queensland, and it's going to be called the Carmichael Mine. They estimate that at peak capacity, it could produce 600 million tonnes of coal a year, and most of that, or much of it, is described as low quality and high ash. So it's not going to be good quality coal, whatever good quality coal may be. I don't think any of us these days think of coal as good quality, regardless of its actual quality. We just want 100% renewables in general. So they're going to get a 60-year lease, I guess, and Adani expects to produce 2.3 billion tonnes of coal in 60 years. You know, we're trying to get to carbon neutral and zero net emissions everywhere. We should be trying for 2030, if not 2050 at the very latest. And a 60-year lease still digging coal out of the ground is basically a disaster. We're in 2020, and that would take us through to 2080, where we're still producing coal to get burnt for power, and there are so many better options. So this is why people have been protesting the Adani mine, and the Australian Conservation Foundation, the ACF, has mounted a legal challenge, and the coal mine has been linked with pollution, excessive water use in an already dry nation, and damage to the reef and other environments via pollution, and also, of course, the immeasurable effects of global warming and the climate emergency, which will cause coral bleaching and acidifying oceans and warming oceans and all the rest. So this is kind of why people are protesting it. But I think it's still, like, we kind of know the name Adani and we talk about it, but I think a lot of people don't know the details of why it's so important to stop this mine. So, Rilke, I know you're quite involved in the anti-Adani movement. Can you tell us a little bit about why this mine's different?
Well, yeah, firstly, it's the only greenfields exploration of coal in the world, which means they're opening a whole new basin that is full of coal to mine, whereas other new coal mines that might be being built are in areas where there's all coal mines around there. They're already extracting things, and they're quite small. Like you said, the billions of tons of coal that they will dig up and then sell and burn it's equivalent to a third of Australia's emissions. And then there's also the whole Galilee Basin is vulnerable, because if Adani goes ahead, then, you know, Gina Reinhart's mine will go ahead, Clive Palmer's mine will go ahead, China First mine will go ahead. So the whole Galilee Basin will be mined, which is the biggest amount of coal that is in existence in the earth. So that's like hugely important. It's not just one coal mine, it is the biggest amount of coal we have in existence on Earth. It's really important to keep that in the ground. On top of that, how, you know, dangerous it is to be burning coal. It's also like, you know, 800,000 people die of coal-related illnesses every year. Like, from every angle, mining coal is just a terrible decision and direction to be going in.
Yeah. So an argument that the government uses over and over again is jobs. And Adani originally presented themselves as being able to produce 10,000 jobs, but their own expert in court said that actually it will produce less than 1,500 jobs, and some people are saying somewhere between 800 to 1,500 jobs. I feel like the people who, in Australia, the not everyday Australians who are supporting this are feeling like, oh, it's going to be our prosperity. We're going to get jobs. Our towns are going to prosper. Can you tell us what the actual reality of it is as you understand it?
Well, yeah, that was just like a political tool to make people worried about their own livelihoods instead of worrying about their livelihoods in terms of like climate change. And yeah, the Australian Institute has really good data showing that if the Galilee Basin were, if just the Adani mine, the Carmichael mine, were to go ahead, then there would be job losses in the coal mining industry of around 6,000 workers. So it's actually detrimental to pre-existing coal miners. Like, obviously we want to phase out all coal mining, but we want to do that in like a fair way for workers. And yeah, if the market just decides that your coal mine is shutting down because Adani's making much cheaper coal, then those workers, that, you know, they're all just going to be, you know, left behind, and no one is benefiting. Miners in Claremont have admitted to knowing they're not benefiting at all from the mine.
You actually have a story where you met one of the miners.
Well, yeah, my friend actually, she did an action on a drill rig where they were doing work on the railway line for the Adani mine, and she locked herself to the drill rig and immobilised it and halted work for maybe 7 hours, and then she had to go back to Claremont for court. And I met her the next day and went to court with her, but she stayed in Claremont the night before and was a bit like scared, and then went to the pub and ended up hanging out with these miners. And this miner gave her $100 to pay her fine with and said, yeah, actually, you know, it doesn't make any difference to us. Obviously, that's just like some anecdotal evidence, but I mean, yeah, people in Bowen, I asked Centrelink if they could help get me a job at Adani, and they said, you got to be related to someone or wait until someone dies to get a job there. So, and, you know, these towns, they just, you know, the workers will fly in from Townsville, or will drive in from Townsville, will fly in from Hunter Valley to Mackay and then drive in. Like, they're not going through Claremont, they're not going through Bowen. There's no benefit to these towns whatsoever, and they're maybe a tiny percentage.
They don't even stop and buy a pie on the way.
So I have heard that Adani are building the mine, and they call it, this is the mine of the future. Like, they've got, like, someone's been quoted to say they're you know, building futuristic mines, where actually they're deliberately cutting jobs and they're using driverless trucks. They've got 45 driverless trucks.
Yep, they're already working with driverless trucks to even create the mine, and that's the majority of the minimal numbers of workers are just going to be this small amount of time while they're actually constructing the mine, and then all those jobs, they're just very short-term jobs, and then they'll disappear because then they will just be like pretty much completely using automated trucks. And yeah, they've got them running right now, you know, building a dam. Yeah, and like, yeah, it's also important, you know, the black-throated finch's habitat is pretty much all destroyed. Like,
it's gone.
Yeah.
Because there was a little movement last year for people to send pictures they'd drawn of or artwork around the black-throated finch to various politicians to try and impact their sense of like what would be lost. And so you're saying that that's actually happened. The majority of that habitat's gone.
Yeah.
Mark here again, and with Ali's permission, I'm just cutting in to quickly plug an episode of Artbreaker that we created in late 2019, all about that black-throated finch art campaign. Led by an amazing artist in Narm, Melbourne, named Charlotte Watson, the Black-Throated Finch project was amazing, and I'm really proud of this little documentary we made about the project, and you can find it linked in the show notes of this episode. But here's a quick grab from it to pique your interest now. The Blackfinch Project is driven by strong emotions. It's been equated to be a protest via art.
Yeah.
Do you feel that's an accurate description?
No.
You're listening to Artbreaker. The black-throated finch. In your mind, are they still alive or are they extinct?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. What does my imagination do? They are still alive. but they don't know that they're dying.
The other thing to note is that the government, the state government, is offering all sorts of incentives, which the scale of these incentives tells me how much money they're planning to make off the mine. Because if they're offering discounts like this, it means they're getting X number more than that in potential revenue, which is why the governments are in it, I think. So royalty deferrals up to 900 million and a total tax exemption of 4.4 billion.
Yeah, it's equivalent to every single Australian giving them $1,600.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so Ben, you went on the Adani convoy last year, and this was a movement started by Bob Brown of Franklin River fame and obviously Green Party fame. How was it? What happened? Why did you decide to go on this convoy?
Well, because it was Bob Brown, yeah, and he wanted to replicate his moment of glory 40 years ago in the Franklin River. So the idea was that Bill Shorten was meant to be part of it, and he was meant to declare, they will never build this mine if I become Prime Minister, like Bob Hawke. He said actually said, this could be your Bob Hawke moment.
Yeah,
but
right.
Bill Shorten failed to rise to the occasion.
He said no thanks.
Yeah, we went up there just to sort of raise awareness all around the country, but people, the press, because the press is all run by Murdoch in Queensland, said we'd gone up there to harass the miners and confront the miners, and that they were frightened of us.
Oh, those poor miners.
Of these grey nomads.
Yeah. So
it was hilarious. But we did get to meet the miners, or confront them.
Well, they came to confront you rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what
right.
happened?
And they were pretending to be angry, but apparently the boss said you get the day off if you go to the protest.
Yeah, they were protesting. They had signs and things.
They were fake protesting.
Great.
They had Go Adani signs.
Yeah.
Go Adani.
Or they had a sign saying, don't like coal, sit in the dark.
Yeah, they had some idea that if they stopped mining the coal, then the whole world would stop.
Yeah.
But they also had this idea that there was so much demand for coal that you could have as many coal mines as you like. There'd be plenty of work for everybody. So somebody's told them that, but I don't know if it's true.
I was told, because there's a couple of, more than a couple, I'm sure, but I know personally a couple of ex-coal miners who are now, activists and lock on to coal trains and the like. And one of them said that when he was in the coal industry, they would get people coming into the mine and experts saying this is all obviously bullshit, the climate change is obviously not a thing, there's actually too much oxygen in the air and we need to be creating CO2 to balance
things.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know.
That amount of misinformation.
Yeah.
So Ben, how did the convoy work out? How did you latch onto it and travel up with it? What was it like? What was the experience like?
It was sort of, exciting. You all camped together in somewhere like Wodonga, and then in the morning the Teslas would lead the convoy, which was kind of weird because they were totally silent and gleaming new machines, and Bob Brown would be in the leading Tesla waving silently as they pulled out. It was a bit like the royal cortege.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't see each other till we got to the next spot, and we basically only would all be together as we took off in the morning, and then people just go all over the place. Yeah, it was quite a moving experience to be part of it, but then we get to Claremont and they were waiting for us. They were all fired up.
I heard there was sort of increasing aggression the further north you got and into sort of the country that is actually being contested.
Yeah, basically two places, Rockhampton and Claremont, which is near the mine. And they had Pauline Hanson, Clive Palmer, Bob Catter and a couple of other right-wing nut jobs all in the pub together, and they were fueling the whole situation, egging everybody on. And so, we were dry. We were in our cars, but everybody was lining, there was a gauntlet of angry people yelling and screaming at us.
And then this horseman came in, this crazy dude on his horse, and just galloped into the arena where everyone's sitting, and he's like, I love coal, makes me money. And then people tried to like stop him, and
I heard he rode through, like people were picnicking with kids.
Yeah, it was like very dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah, and then he tried to jump over the gate because people locked him in the arena, and yeah, someone got hurt. It was wild.
So it's an interesting point, I think, because what you guys are doing is called direct action in terms of how protests run, and you're going there to be visible and potentially disrupt things. Like you've been talked a couple of times about friends of yours locking on to equipment to stop the equipment from operating for a while. But direct action is, in its primary kind of concept, non-violent. So can we talk about that in terms of like what response you're getting from people who are objecting to you guys and what actually your goals are and your ethics around that?
Yeah, well, we practice non-violent direct action. And direct action, I mean, it could be in other countries, it obviously does get violent. That's, the fight that they're having to make. Yeah, so it, depends what you want to do. And direct action can be like, food not bombs and other kind of things. Like, but we're practicing civil disobedience, which is a form of direct action, and it involves, breaking the law and, utilising your ability to stand in the way of something.
What group are you a part of, and what are sort of the decisions they've made as a group about how they operate?
So I'm part of Frontline Action on Coal, and we use non-violent civil disobedience, and our idea of violence, what we've kind of described it as, is, you can verbally be violent, or if you destroy property, that's violent. So we don't practice any kind of violent behaviours whatsoever. I think, like, even the lock-ons that people use, that is a form of making us really passive. Like, you're locked onto this machine, you're not doing any harm to anyone else, you kind of are.
And you're not damaging the machine.
No, not at all. And you're like incapacitated, so you're not a threat or anything, so it's just, very non-threatening. And I mean, we're challenging all these things because of like how dangerous they are, and to challenge them with violence kind of in this situation, it wouldn't be a good idea. Obviously, for other activists in different countries, like, that is what they have to do to survive.
We're pretty protected in Australia.
Yeah.
And the danger to you as a protester is much less than if you were somewhere else.
Yeah.
Where the laws are different.
Some people practice non-violence on principle, and, some people practice it because it's pragmatic and it is the right thing to do. Like, we already cop all this stuff from the media, if they were then, criticising us for kind of breaking things or, being violent, it would not look good. And also it just opens the door to, people to do the same onto you. And
Yep, sure. It opens an ugly window for...
Yeah, you can't condemn violence if you're also kind of practicing it. Yeah.
So, Ben, did you have a story about someone who kind of ruined a blockade because they damaged...
Yeah, that was actually Luke Bennett said he was in a blockade years ago for North East Forest Action. They were very effective at blockades because they could get hundreds of people to stay there for months. But there was one blockade where they had over 100 people, and somebody, not one of them, decided to go and destroy a bulldozer. And they had to get everybody out because they said, if you go and wreck their machines, they get very, very angry and they'll come down and beat people up. So that you basically don't want them to get too angry.
Yeah.
And sometimes the machines are owned by, a different person that's just contracted by this company. So you don't want to create all this animosity in the community when it's not, that's going to like hinder your cause as well.
And so what was the relationship between the convoy with Bob Brown at the front and your group, Front Action on Coal? Was there a relationship between those two movements?
A little bit, but a lot of organisations are scared to work with Frontline Action on Coal because we people do civil disobedience and they break the law, and we help people to do that in the safest way possible. So they don't want to get their charity status removed. But the Bob Brown Foundation is not like that. But yeah, I'm not sure. We like came to Claremont with all the Wangan and Jangalingu and like helped cook all the meals and had a stall and had stalls like at all the things. But yeah, it was going to be a stop on the convoy to come to the camp, and then that decision was changed. I'm not sure of the details why, but it was like very talked about, and a lot of people did come after Claremont.
Bob Brown has the philosophy of non-violent action as well. Is that something that was spoken about on the convoy?
Yeah, I think they worked well a lot together, Frontline Action and Bob Brown. But then, yeah, Bob Brown Foundation is a charity as well, and they get their charity status taken away if they advocate criminality.
Yeah.
So they've got them over a barrel, all of those groups. But I think, they're doing protests in the Tarkine, and so that's probably just a different arm of the organisation. You've got to have your sort of militia arm and then your sort of legal arm and keep them separate.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the opposite of militia, isn't it? But it is your active frontline kind of arm. So you actually go through some training, Rilke, you said, to learn how to do non-violent direct action safely.
Yeah, so we make sure like anyone who's going to do an action with us, they have to have gone to a non-violent direct action training, which is a whole day of learning about the history of direct action, and then learning about the techniques, learning about how to cope in confronting situations. So you'll do like hustle lines, or we'll do like a mock protest, and just to kind of give some guidelines of what to do and make it safer, and what not to do, and then give them like a little bit of experience. And then you also do a legal briefing so people
understand what they're going into.
Yeah, and because then you can like have actual consent, because you know what you're consenting to. So just to inform them properly. Yeah, that's kind of the same as what the non-violent direct action training is too. So they know what they're getting into and
can make that decision fully consciously.
Yeah.
And can I add in here? I went up to Camp Bindi, and I must say that...
So was that the end of the convoy, Camp Bindi?
No, I wasn't there for the convoy. Okay. It was later.
The convoy went to Claremont. That was in central Queensland, and then it went back to Canberra.
Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of people didn't go to Canberra. Some people stayed and came to Bindi, yeah.
And I went up, it was the following year actually, I think. Oh, no, it was the same year, but later. So I've been there a couple of times, and the training is extremely good, and people do have a sense of knowing where they stand, and it's a really welcoming environment and very inclusive. So it's quite a special place in terms of that, and I'd encourage anyone to go there and help out, because it's actually where a lot of this action is coming from on the front line for Adani. So it's actually quite a rare place, and it's really well organised and self-organising system, so it's fantastic.
All right, so tell me about Camp Bimby. Is this your group set it up as a base camp? Is that?
Yes, yeah. Some great environmentalists with some money bought a property, and it's 100 acres. It was originally Adani was going to make their own railway line, and then because of really great campaigning all over the world, a lot from the Wangan and Jangalingu and from Stop Adani and, FLAC as well, they couldn't get the funding, so then they needed $2 billion. And then Horizon, which is the biggest company that holds the majority of Australia's coal, it's 49% owned by the Queensland government. They said, you can use our railway line. So it saved Adani $2 billion, but it also meant that they weren't going to build this railway line, which the camp was near to that site, but now we are 4 hours away from the mine site. I mean, it would be hard to be anywhere, because if you were closer to the mine site, you'd be so far away from food, and people come. We go and collect people from the airport, and so it would make things more difficult. But then it does make things quite difficult. Yeah, but it's good to have a space. But it's different to sometimes we call it the Adani blockade, but, it's different to most of the blockades in Australia have been occupying the site that they're protecting. So I think it is harder when you're unable to do that, and it's harder anyway just being in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think the whole Adani movement has been going for years, and some very successful elements of it are how many businesses and companies that were going to be involved in the mine or supporting Adani in one way or another as a contractor or have retreated from that and said they won't work with Adani because of how much public protest there is and how many people have told them that it's a bad idea to get involved. So do you have any comment on what's been happening there?
Yeah, just like contractor action. So, that's been really great because with the mine it's still kind of progressing, but then it's really kind of good to know that a lot of people are making decisions based on people taking action. Yeah, they're not working with Adani. So, yeah, I think that's a bunch of different grassroots groups that work together and go and us too. Like we did a lot of actions in Townsville and in Mackay with different piping contractors, and Siemens is the signalling company,
for the
which
trains.
You know, they said they would. Like people were camped outside of Siemens offices just in Sydney because it was right after the fires, like families who just lost their homes. They still decided to do it, to go with Adani, and then just recently they found out Adani lied in their talks and stuff, but because it's, you know, legally they've signed the contract. I don't know, but it's really positive and it is working, all these.
So I think that's something, if people are listening to this and they're not quite prepared to do some direct action training and camp out in Bimby, they can join the various petitions to companies that are supporting Adani and sign things and just show that people right across Australia and right across the world really care about this issue.
Yeah.
There's lots of different groups all working together. There's Friends of the Earth, Stop Adani, Climates for Change, and they're all doing the sort of, following the money. So they're actually contacting people all around the world and warning them not to work with Adani. So that's a really important part of the whole movement as well.
Jacynta, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more about your experience up at Bimby and what you felt about all of that, just if you could expand on that a bit.
There were several responses. I suppose my initial one was probably observational and picking up on the way of being in the place, which I found extremely respectful. It's a working camp. It's not a holiday camp. It's not people just sitting around. People work. People are working all the time, and
yet the revolution is going to lots of meetings.
There's a lot of meetings which I was quite fine with. I actually quite found it really interesting, that process of how they ran, and they're always trying to streamline them to a certain extent, but things take time. I found it extremely respectful. People did what they did, and there was very much your own self working out what that was for yourself. It's a really good setup with food. It's really clean, you're camping, you've got your own space, and the morning starts pretty much with an 8 a.m. meeting, which sort of sets up the tone of the rest of the day, or what needs to be said, or what needs to be communicated and what needs to be done for that day. So everyone's really informed about what's going on.
And it's non-hierarchical and consensus-based decision-making processes, so that's why there's a lot of meetings, I guess.
There's also, I think, still a lot of work to be done on how one practices consensus, and I think that's an evolving, and it's a practice rather than anything else. And the other thing that is happening up there, which is I think happening all throughout Australia, is I think people take their own practice of relationship with land into a personal place. So I don't think we've actually explored very much bringing that into the fore of a cultural group practice, and it pushes a lot of buttons to do that. And also we in Australia have a lot to deal with Indigenous culture here, where colonisation has devastated it. So there's those sort of senses that...
So what can that mean for people?
Well, I think we have to just practice and explore and start doing some things. And, support sovereignty actually, in terms of the Indigenous culture, is actually learn about the history of the area you're in and the broader aspects of where those people were. Like, Victoria had the largest population of Indigenous people in Australia in this area. So few left, and there's a whole history there of how they got decimated. So we need to start learning that and trying to understand different ways of being, but then also make mistakes in how we explore that relationship with land. So most people are up at Camp Bindi because they want to stop the climate crisis, because they want people not to wreck the earth. So they're inherent in that is this love of earth. And so there's something about that I
just don't want to see everything die.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see that. And so there's that aspect as well that is underneath all of this action, I feel, and something that we have to step out of our comfort zone. And
I think that's an important point about the motivations of the people who are protesting Adani and similar things right across Australia and right across the world, is that they're not just ratbags trying to, get attention or cause disruption because they love it. They're people who passionately care about the environment that they're trying to protect and can see the devastation that will happen in the future if we don't stop these things from happening. And it comes out of a place of a deep love for the land rather than any other reason.
And that's true. And also these people get burnt out too as well. So there's that restorative practice that can help with that.
So you went up to Camp Bimby because that's where Rilke's based?
Yep.
As parents. So I think that's a nice turnaround, because you, as parents, took her along to various protests and you've had a lifetime of being active in environmental things. Can you talk a little bit about how you raised your kids and maybe Rilke can talk about what it was like being raised by Ben and Jacynta?
Well, I'm extremely proud of what Rilke does.
Right.
It's a really hard journey. It's thankless, and sometimes people tell her she should get a job. And in my understanding, she has got a really important job that is not necessarily acknowledged as an important job, but trying to save our planetary practices at the moment in the crisis is extremely important. Upbringing, there's one thing about I was reflecting on is that we've always sort of tried to live off as least amount of money as possible, just because it makes your life easier. You don't have obligations then. And I think in our consumerist society, which I've always had problems with, exponential growth on a finite planet just doesn't make sense, that we need to have a lot less. We need to do a lot less and have a lot less. And particularly in Australia, we're really rich. I think I've probably instilled that in both our daughters as they grew up, and at different times they've taken that on, at different times not.
I just wanted to say that it's not like we've been lifelong activists, that we went to a couple of blockades when the kids were little just to show them what they were like, but in between we just sort of, like everybody else, go along to the demos in the city and stuff, but it's only recently that we've become more activists.
And is that a stage of life thing? Or is it a stage of the state of the world thing?
It's no, it's more the state of the world, yeah.
I think I became involved in environmental stuff when I sort of, in the late 90s, I started doing a Masters in Social Ecology up at the University of Western Sydney. And that questioned a lot of how we are in the world. And that's been there sort of all my adult life. And I think that's all bound up together. And then after that did a course in facilitation, then after that started working with environmental movements around the transition movement. So I'd been involved in that sort of change process from then. So there's all these different ways of getting involved, really.
And Ben, your art practice, you're an artist, a visual artist, and that's always been themed to the environment and obviously built in your children a sense of love and responsibility to the earth.
Yeah, I think if you're an artist, you're showing people that there's something far more important than all that bullshit that goes on in the sort of commercial world, that there's something really true. And, you know, truth and beauty is what we've got to try and maintain those values so that we've got an alternative to look up to. Mm. Yeah, so that's sort of got a statement of its own.
I think one other thing we did when the kids were, as they were growing up, is like we had a reputation which was like just what it was we would go away every year for quite a few months. We spent a lot of time camping all around Australia.
Lots of bushwalks. They would bribe us with barley sugars. Yeah. So, yeah, seriously, just every holiday I'd go to a different national park and go camping and go walking. And yeah, I used to be like, oh, I want to go to like Disneyland or something. But then I got older and was like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to have had such an upbringing, just exploring all these places in Australia that's so beautiful. And yeah, that definitely gave me a strong connection to the land. And then also, growing up in the bush with parents that have a strong passion for like social and environmental justice. Yeah.
And there's a photo of you as a young child and your sister.
Yeah, I'd remembered going to this blockade in Goolgook, but I had not remembered what happened there. And the other day I found a photo of my sister and I pretending to lock onto a bulldozer. I was like, oh my God, we've come full circle. That's great.
Yeah, somehow that memory stuck in your craw and it seemed so familiar. You just walked in and put your arm in the lock-on. It seemed the natural thing to do. But you were talking about whether it's a stage of life thing, that it's true that the activists, especially like Camp Imby, tend to be pre-breeding or post-breeding. That people of breeding age tend to be too busy getting on with their busy lives.
Raising their children, yeah.
Some, unfortunately, they tend to think what they're doing is more important than the issues at hand. And until we convince everybody that this issue is more important than your trivial careers and petty little lives, then we're going to have trouble.
Yeah, everyone has something more important to do and no one has time. And it seems to be what is more important is ensuring that them or their immediate family does well in neoliberal capitalism.
I know a lot of people who are profoundly anxious and even feel guilty for their children and for the future of their children, but it doesn't help them necessarily step out of the sort of like marching line towards making enough money so the kids can go to school and still go on that camp and still have that instrument. It doesn't change those priorities.
We do need to step out of our comfort zone. There's no two ways about it. We'll be forced to, and the more we actually prepare for change and work out what is essential and start breaking those false notions of what it is to be interacting, successful Australian, once we have to break that down, and change is not comfortable sometimes.
If they feel anxious, then they should explore all the knowledge about different ways of surviving in all different cultures. Like, this system is not
the
how
only way to live.
Humans... Yeah, there's so many other ways to live that have been tried and tested, and or all these great ideas. So, like, at least try and know that there is a different way instead of just being like, this is the only way.
Yeah, we're on a big ship and it's really hard to turn it around. Like, we've got this global economy that's being totally affected in every way at the moment, and it is really hard to make changes when you're on one big ship together. And we talk about diversity. Now, we haven't got diversity in our human ways of being in the world, in our societies, in our cultures, probably we have in the past. So there's all of that needs to shift.
We have some great activists, Ray and John, and they're maybe in their late 60s, and they feel very guilty for being so complicit in the system and, like, doing really well from it. And now they just go and lock onto things and block roads and stop bulldozers all the time. It's great. So they're kind of making up for it.
It's never too late.
Yeah, it is never too late. Bill Ryan, may he rest in peace, he died just recently, but he was arrested when I was arrested, when we shut down the world's biggest coal port in Newcastle for a day. He was the oldest man in Australian history to be arrested.
However,
96.
96.
So, no excuses. People sometimes like, oh, yeah, it's good you youngins are doing this. It's like, you're not too old to do it. Why is it our job? And we can't do it alone. People thank you. And it's like, I don't know why you're thanking me. You think, thanks for saving the world. It's like, you kidding? You think, I can save the world? There's a tiny amount of it's like, we really can't do this. We
need massive change.
So when there's a call out, I reckon people should really take it on board and question, okay, what's essential, and go up there and join.
And even if you just become the camp cook and you cook up a brilliant meal for people.
Much appreciated. Those things are like very good roles to fill.
In the camp, there's a lot of different roles. It's not like everyone has to go lock on. There's a huge amount of support that goes around someone locking on. There's a huge amount of planning and preparation. So actually, you don't have to go up there thinking you're going to do direct action, be arrested and civil disobedience. That is actually not necessary at all. There's so many roles to fill that help with enabling that to happen. So there's no problem about that.
And you can do protests that are non-arrestable situations as well. So, whatever people are comfortable with doing.
I just wanted to explain that when you go to Camp Bimby, apart from being a sort of utopian social world, you get all your training, and then it's up to you to decide what you're going to do. And you get in make a group of people, and you go off and secretly decide your action. And you don't tell anybody what you're doing, because that's your action. And but usually it just involves maybe only 1 or 2 people getting arrested and 7 or 8 people being support. So you don't have to start off by being arrested. You just one of the support people who are like someone watching to make sure so that you know the legal situation. And there's all these different roles you can do before you actually go and get arrested.
But I will say that getting arrested for this type of action is one of the best experiences I've ever had. Like, that was one of the best days of my life, locking onto this stacker reclaimer, because you're like, wow, I'm just little me and I can stop this really evil thing, and it's amazing. You feel powerful, and it feels great to do that.
Yeah. And how did it feel actually being arrested, and how did the police treat you?
Well, we had good training with what to say to the police, which is pretty much nothing. You just say no comment and give them your name. It's different in different states. But there was 26 of us, and I was arrested with another woman. The police were pretty fine. They brought in the riot cops from Sydney who went to our diversion, which was the Knitting Nanas. They're into nanarchy. So there was 30 riot cops, went to the diversion, and it's all these grandmas who were really lovely, and they obviously felt like psychos. And then they came to us, and it was crazy. They just stood around doing nothing. Even a horse tried to come into the coal piles and was like, I can't horse around here. And they had one angle grinder to cut 26 people off. That's 13 metal bars, one angle grinder. So it took ages. It took 9 hours, and all these riot cops standing around doing absolutely nothing. And then, so we just thought it was funny. It was great. We had a picnic. Rosie and I had a picnic. We all had packed lunches, and, picked a shady spot, and it's surreal. You're just there with all these humongous piles of coals, the biggest bits of machinery, sizes of 5 houses, 10 houses, just huge bits of machinery. And it's great. You're just stopping all this stuff. And and then we went to the cells, and we're held in the watch house. They usually hold you for the longest time they can, for 4 to 6 hours. And I mean, people were having great time. They were singing, making human pyramids. They got the water cups and made little hats and pretend cigarettes. They were making whale noises. It was quite fun. But I mean, it's not a fun situation for the majority of people who get arrested, and they're not getting arrested, on purpose. We were all white people, from rather semi-privileged backgrounds. It was a good experience for us, but, it's important to know that getting arrested is a very dangerous experience for Indigenous Australians, and it's not a choice that other people can make, because, it's not the same situation for them. So,
totally. Absolutely. That's a really good point. And what does it mean? Do you get a permanent record or anything? What does it mean long term for you?
Well, surprisingly, I'm still on bail. I haven't been allowed in Newcastle for a year and a half, which is just ridiculous. Ideally, because I've never committed offence before, it's likely to get no conviction recorded, so you won't have a criminal history. And Bill, we got him to go through first just because, I don't know, like he was charged separately. So we've just been holding our court case
So Bill's
off.
our 96-year-old
Yeah,
man.
they couldn't get him on being armed with intent. And then they charged him with trespass and the interference with the mine. And he was challenging that in the Supreme Court.
Can I tell that lovely story about Bill? Is that...
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's a lovely story. He had been charged before, and at the previous time, the magistrate said to him, look, maybe you should take up another hobby like fishing. So this time at the Newcastle, he was sitting somewhere and on the railway line, and he had a fishing line
with a cardboard fish
sign, with cardboard fish saying "Gone fishing."
Gone fishing.
So he was still into protesting.
But yeah, it's highly likely we'll get no conviction recorded and just a fine. That's generally the case for people who haven't committed an offence. They're very ageist in the courts too, so if you are old, you're likely to, and white, you're likely to get a much lower, much more lenient sentence.
So people, wherever they are, how can they support people at Bimby or other actions? Ben mentioned a group, a large number of organisations that were active in the sort of boycott kind of area of protest, but what else is there out there?
Well, there's a new group, the Galilee Rising, which is kind of works with Stop Adani and with Frontline Action on Coal, and they are trying to hold information sessions in different places throughout Australia to let people know what's going on with the mine and encourage them to take action. And then they're going to be doing, I think they already are doing nonviolent direct action training, so you can get trained before going to the camp. There's like a lot of things to do at the camp, so the less work, the better if you can get trained somewhere else. And Extinction Rebellion does a lot of trainings as well. So yeah, you can follow those guys on Facebook and connect with them. Maybe you can hold a talk, or maybe someone with experience can come and help run a nonviolent direct action workshop. Yeah, there's Blockade Galilee, which works a lot with the different contractors and things, so follow them and get in touch. And yeah, and then there's like in Melbourne, there's alliance between WACA, which is the Whistleblowers and Activists Alliance, and LASNet, which is Latin American Solidarity Network, who they're doing a lot of stuff because BHP, you know, they don't have any coal mines here, but, you know, they had that dam that broke, you know, and now the bosses are facing, you know, murder prosecution because they
didn't build good infrastructure in their
and
mine.
they just ignored the warnings from the architects and things. So like, because they didn't care about a whole village of people, and their warning system for if it collapsed, well, they didn't have one. They're not even like anything. Luckily this woman woke up in the night and she rode around on a bicycle telling everyone, and it saved a lot of people, but I think 17 people were killed. So this Australian company, or people with their headquarters in Australia, and so those guys and then Frontline Action on Coal have an alliance, and they have been ramping up the blockade of the International Mining Conference, which is in Melbourne every year, I think September around then, and yeah, where all the heads of all these evil companies come to Melbourne. And yeah, last year was pretty successful. There was a lot of resistance against that. And then just, I think, supporting like Indigenous sovereignty campaigns are really important, and like the Japwarong trees. And I know there's some forest blockades going to be happening out near Hurstbridge, a bit further over. Yeah, I think like Bunnings and Office Works are like logging those things. So while they're not coal, yeah, it's still great to even, you know, get more experience and
more local
people.
Actions that people could get involved with to get experience.
And then it can normalise direct action more, and more people will know about it, more people will do it, and this movement will grow, and maybe we can eventually have civil resistance like what's going on in Hong Kong, and then people will have to listen to, and maybe they'll bloody do something.
Yeah, you can get started with the collaborators. There's collaborators who are collaborating with the coal miners all over the place, and people are going and blockading their headquarters. GHD, they were collaborating with Adani, had been doing for 10 years, and we successfully got them to pull out. So you can just cut your teeth on going out and standing in front of the offices of all the collaborators.
There's heaps of Stop Adani groups all over the country, and there's Frontline Action on Coal in Melbourne, and so just like connect with people, like-minded people, and get some training, and stop a coal train.
Yeah. And it is, I think, important to re-emphasise that the Adani mine is a mega mine. It's insanely huge. And if it goes ahead, they're estimating that there'll be 200 million tonnes of CO2 released into the atmosphere over 60 years, just in the actual operations of the mine. And burning that coal is at 130 billion tonnes of CO2 over that amount of time.
Yeah, and that's just the Adani mine.
Yeah.
Like where, if the Adani mine goes ahead, all the other mines will go ahead as well. To great people like Gina Reinhart and Clive Palmer will earn billions of dollars. But it'll open the whole Galilee Basin. And even if if climate change was not a thing, it would even still be a really dangerous decision because of the Great Artesian Basin and the water usage, as well as the Doongmabulla Springs, which is a sacred place for Indigenous people. And the scientific studies were based on the reliance that the water for the mine was coming from this aquifer instead of that aquifer, but there's no data. They know that they don't know which aquifer the water will come from. It's just very, very risky.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism of their environmental research and what they've presented. And that's a whole nother topic, I think. Aside from the actual coal coming out of the ground and speeding up climate change, it's, we live in an era where it's absolutely clear that we need to reduce emissions, and we're still looking at going ahead with a mine that will give us 60 years worth of...
Yeah, it's madness.
It's madness. All right, well, thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks, Ellie.
That was Ben, Jacynta and their daughter Rilke in an interview recorded in May 2020. As mentioned at the start of the show, this is a repeat from early last year in honour of Jacynta's non-violent direct action undertaken in the last week, where she locked onto a machine used to help transport coal and halted Adani's works for over 4 hours. She's just one of many passionate Australians doing what they feel they must do to curb fossil fuel extraction and its use. Head over to saltgrasspodcast.com for links to many of the groups and resources mentioned in this episode. For those of you listening on Main FM and 3MDR, please note that you can listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your preferred podcasting app. If you can't find Saltgrass on your podcasting app, please let me know and we'll see what we can do to make it available for you there. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube, and please join our emailing list to get reminders and updates about the show. Again, you can do that by going to saltgrasspodcast.com. This program is made possible with support from Main FM and the Community Broadcasting Foundation. Find out more at cbf.org.au. My name is Alison Hanley. Thanks for listening.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change. Saltgrass.
Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com.
The Climactic Collective.